Did you think professional writing was going to be easy? I did, and after more than 13 years as a professional editor, writing coach and TV story producer, reading thousands of novels and scripts, working on hit TV shows, and helping new and experienced writers achieve professional success, I wish I'd known how to learn all of this smarter and faster. So to help you start banging out books and screenplays that stand out where it counts, here are 19 truths about professional writing that will help you master the craft with less guesswork and less stress, so your ambition comes to life in less time.
Lesson 1.
I used to wait for inspiration to strike like a loitering pervert hoping to snatch a glimpse of his muse, but in hindsight, fooling myself that creativity's winds would at some point sweep me off just meant that I could justify distracting myself instead of getting words down on the page. And after working with professionals who churn out quality drafts in just weeks, the fact is they all set aside time to write, because just like going to the gym, you'll only get stronger when you show up and put the hours in to the right exercises. And a great tip I learned from Neil Gaiman to help you with that is that when you do sit down to write, set a timer, and in that time you can either write or do nothing but nothing else, and inevitably writing becomes more fun than doing nothing, and the words will quickly stack up. So show up consistently. Life will always get in the way, but what gets measured gets improved.
Lesson 2.
I grew up believing that novels, TV, film and theatre were completely separate worlds and all written in different ways, but the truth is that's total BS, and while the mediums differ in how you bring them to life, this fact is why we see great novelists like Anthony Horowitz, Gillian Flynn and countless others moving into screenwriting, and people who start as screenwriters or working in TV becoming best-selling authors like George R.R. Martin. After more than a decade of cross-medium work and helping writers like George write sellout plays, then optioned TV scripts and a debut film script that was quickly produced by an Oscar-winning team, the truth is that story principles are universal. Once I mastered how stories function universally, I could help writers achieve success in any medium they want, and that means that if you make mastery your goal, you can do the same. Because the lesson is that mastering how professional stories work means you can write novels, TV episodes, film, theatre plays, whatever you want, because the underlying mechanics of great storytelling never change.
Lesson 3.
Now, I'm going to have to come out swinging here with something that's going to piss off about half of you straight away. Because I used to romanticize writing by instinct and discovery writing my way through my ideas, until years had gone by and I realized my approach actually meant spending months on drafts that fizzled out and needed massive rewrites to try and retroactively fix. I was indulging the romanticism of being a writer, but really getting nothing actually done. And as soon as I entered the professional world, I learned the brutal truth that discovery writing isn't a reality for anyone who is actually making a reliable living and income from their work.
It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer.
Because it's only when nobody knows you and you have infinite time that you can indulge yourself in that way. In over 13 years of industry experience, I've never met a single professional writer who operates with the idea that they'll figure it out as they go, because once your first novel or script makes people pay attention, then their time and money is going to be spent on you, which is not infinite, so you have to prove to agents, producers and publishers that your story and writing ability can deliver to budgets, advances and deadlines, proving your vision is going to work before they risk their time, money and trust on you, which means learning to outline watertight stories, films and episodes first. And if you'll let me be more honest than I probably should, there is an entire industry built around keeping you in the lie that discovery writing works, because if you take all the time in the world, consultants and editors can make more money by farming you for more and more rounds of notes.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And look, I make money from consulting too, but if I can't fix a problem for you in a way that also teaches you how to fix the underlying issue so you never have to pay me to get the same type of feedback again, I consider that a failure. So the real lesson here is outline first and write second, whatever outlining means for you. That's how you save months of time, avoid self-doubt, stress, and huge rewrites after throwing in all your energy, while helping to reliably deliver work that lands punches and quickly builds industry trust. And because that won't come naturally to all of you, I've made a GPT that will help you do all of that in just minutes, linked in the description.
Lesson 4.
I once believed that great writing happens in isolation, that we lock ourselves away until we emerge with something brilliant. But years of working in the industry showed me that while we see one writer's name on a book cover or a screen credit, pretty much every writer whose name you know and admire relies on someone to bounce idea off, with an editor, development team, or executive just one call away. So understand that great writing is and has always been collaborative. Don't wait to earn help, seek it early. Feedback will accelerate your growth, sharpen your ideas, and prevent you from creating in a vacuum where self-doubt always thrives. The faster you get comfortable seeking help, the faster you'll write something that truly stands out. And that fact never changes, no matter how experienced you are.
Lesson 5.
Early on, every time I hit a writing block, I assumed it meant I wasn't as talented yet as I secretly hoped. But working under intense deadlines with award-winning writers like Sir Christopher Hampton taught me one simple truth. Once you understand story structure, you almost always know what comes next.
I usually take a longer time to plan a piece of work than to actually write it. I keep notebooks and I accumulate things, and I do think very hard about the structure, because I think structure is something that audiences appreciate, even if they don't recognize it or they don't know that it's there. They know when it's not there.
Structure gives every scene a purpose, and when you know the what and why, figuring out the how becomes simpler and your writing will rarely lock up.
Lesson 6.
One of the things most of us who write love to do is waffle on, overwriting. The problem is that in every medium we have a word budget that caps how many words we can get away with. But lots of new writers equate complexity with skill, flaunting their vocabulary with fancy words. And I was guilty with this too when I was still getting writing hairs on my chest. Then one of my early industry mentors gave me the mantra, how can I say this with the fewest possible words? And after more than a decade working as an editor, leading editorial and story development teams, I can promise that slashing and simplifying your prose makes writing clearer, tighter, and a more compelling reader experience. So unless you want your writing to sound like a courtyard full of first-year theatre students, always ask, how can I say this with fewer words and less complexity? Clarity beats complexity almost all of the time.
Lesson 7.
After reading thousands of scripts and manuscripts professionally, one main pattern stood out. Newer writers love writing whatever scenes and details about characters feel interesting to them, but which don't serve the story readers and audiences came to read or see. By trying to serve multiple character elements all the time, you're actually killing engagement because your readers and audiences have been promised a specific journey, and detail becomes indulgence when it isn't tied to the narrative journey they've signed up to experience. So the safest way to weave in character detail is when it's in some way merged with informing the reader or audience's sense of progression about what they signed up to read or see.
Lesson 8.
When you're writing something high concept, the stakes tend to be obvious. Explosions, monsters, apocalypses, whatever. But low concept stories are deceptive. They still require stakes, but the subject matter isn't usually so obviously exciting. So how do you make those just as compelling? I learned the key is actually pretty simple. Whatever the protagonist wants must feel like life or death to them in achieving, regardless of whether that's the case or not. So make the goal feel vital to the protagonist. Failure has to feel like death or a total shattering of their world, because if it doesn't feel that important to the protagonist, it won't to your reader or audience either. But fix that and it will.
Lesson 9.
The majority of scripts and novels I read by aspiring pros suffer from passive characters who are victims of the story's events. Passive and reactive the whole time. Events don't equal a story, and working with some of the heaviest hitters in the UK TV industry taught me that a great story isn't about its events at all. It's born of characters making tough decisions under pressure, and events exist to create those moments. A choice is passive. It can be received but not acted on, whereas a decision is always active. And decisions keep your characters active, revealing their character in doing so and keeping them in the driving seat of your plot. Because we can all say things, right? I could claim to be a world champion fighter, but if somebody kicks in the door and rushes at me, how I decide to act in that moment will reveal the truth or falsity of my words and reveal my true character to you in some kind of action from me either way. So force characters into difficult decisions as often as possible. That's the fastest way to keep them active, reveal and develop their character, and help them control the narrative. And the need for doing this never stops, no matter how big of a writer you become, which brings us to lesson number 10. When I was script editing Poldark for the BBC, the writer, Debbie Horsfield, often had to reshape the novel's protagonist from someone who reacted to events into somebody who actively fought through them, because without conflict and genuine obstacles to overcome, nothing in terms of story progress feels earned, and earned progression is what makes progress satisfying. Conflict and tension are the oxygen stories need. If there's nothing tricky to navigate or overcome, it all feels too easy. If nothing is at stake, we get bored, and feeling safe or comfortable is the death of good engaging writing.
Lesson 11.
Talking of working on shows for the BBC, when I was story producing Silent Witness, which is basically the UK version of something like CSI, it was my first experience with working in that kind of format. And in procedurals like that, something where it's a kind of story of the week, the protagonists don't fundamentally change themselves. They've typically got flat arcs. But because stories are a process of change, mechanically, characters with flat arcs aren't there to change themselves anyway. They exist to go into the world and lives of others, and in the course of the story's events or an investigation, in this case, force a transformative arc, a journey of introspection and change in somebody else through what that storyline in that particular episode explores and exposes. Whether the protagonist personally evolves or becomes the catalyst for that in other people, your story has to create a sense of change being tangible somewhere, otherwise nothing meaningful has happened. And if you want to master story and character arcs for free while planning your story with a proven process, check out my free course and the GPT linked in the description to do that in less time.
Lesson 12.
While I was a story producer for the BBC, my friend Nick, who is now a BBC drama commissioner, helped new writers who were juggling stories with multiple protagonists by handing them the mantra, "Whose scene is this?"
There's a few things, I think, as I said before, I think sometimes people come in and they're so desperate to impress, they throw everything they've ever thought, especially if they're really new and it's one of their first things that they've ever done. And you're just like absolutely overwhelmed by you've got to sort of try and unpick what is it you want to say and do.
Because while you're probably going to be writing chapters and scenes with lots of information, and that's all good, you need to stay mindful of the fact that your readers and audience can only hold so much in their head. Your scenes are basically puzzle pieces, so you need to make it clear for your readers how those are all clicking together, and importantly, who is providing the important piece of information to hold on to most of all, to go into the next chapter or scene holding in their mind. Audiences and readers rank and remember information based on perceived importance. You need to make it clear who the point of view character is in every chapter and scene, which is generally going to be whoever this scene is focused on changing or challenging the most. That keeps your narrative coherent and guides your readers about the order of informational importance, so they know what to retain.
Lesson 13.
Building on that same mantra, I used to get confused about how to juggle multiple storylines myself when a story has multiple or several protagonists, because how could I possibly keep the story from bloating when I'm trying to serve so many of them, right? But now that you understand how a story is a process of change, to make that journey impactful and meaningful, you have to know what the story is really about at its core, and that's its theme. So how can you tell whose story it really is if you've got multiple protagonists and deliver a theme clearly without it getting messy? The trick is by identifying who in your story's climax is going to make the decisions and actions that bring that theme to visible life, because that reveals who the true protagonist is going to have to be. So the quickest way to guarantee an impactful and coherent story experience is to think about your ending and what you want to happen there. Ask what that says to narrow in on your theme, and then identify the climactic decisions and actions made by a character that reveal that in action, and then you've got your protagonist, so you can build the story around them and building them to that point.
Lesson 14.
If you're anything like me, you find yourself coming up with cool premises all the time. But the truth is, ideas are cheap and won't land until you know what readers and audiences actually connect to inside cool ideas. A new world or clever twist is always worth having, but after working with A-list writers on hit shows and seeing why producers chase existing IP, I learned that standout and enduring stories tap into universal truths, explore some aspect of the human experience, or reflect elements of our world back at us. Poldark is a period drama, but the protagonist Ross is an avatar of modern Western ideas ideals, placed in a period of prejudices and injustices that his values compel him to fight against, meaning we like him because we can relate to him despite the world he exists in being unfamiliar. And then we made sure each series in some way explored something current through a historical lens. So your story will have the best chance of standing out when it either holds a mirror to the present in some way or explores human experiences and truths that endure.
Lesson 15.
I'm a bookworm and grew up wanting to be a novelist, so prose fiction was my first love, specifically sci-fi and fantasy and thrillers. But after learning the craft of screenwriting and working with industry leaders, I realized the danger of prose is its scope for self-indulgence. Screenwriting strips all of that away by demanding economical writing that keeps characters and stories moving at pace by externalizing emotion and thought in action. Now, most aspiring writers over-explain in their prose, telling people what things mean, but in screenwriting, the famous mantra is show don't tell. And when I realized that in prose fiction, show don't tell just translates to describe don't explain, I was able to cut the feeling of distance that comes from telling readers information in prose by applying the same screenwriting rules, achieving the feeling of being more in the moment and experiencing everything more vividly too. So the lesson is that show don't tell is vital for engaging writing, and if you're writing prose fiction and that phrase doesn't make much sense to you, just turn it into describe don't explain, and if you are writing a novel, remember to use sensory detail as your super weapon to make us feel everything more vividly too.
Lesson 16.
I'm willing to bet you've heard the phrase write what you know, and maybe that's made you think, like I once did, that it means you should write from a literal experience. But working for so long in the engine room of commercial storytelling taught me what it really refers to is emotional truth, not writing parts of your biography. And that freed me, and now you, to write anything you can imagine, grounded in the emotional experience you've had, which will suffuse whatever you make up and make it feel authentically real. So the truth is, you don't have to live something to write it, you just need to understand how to access the emotional landscapes you've lived through to bring it to life. Emotional authenticity is your real superpower. Channel your emotional history, not just your literal one.
Lesson 17.
For years, I believed success meant writing full-time, and anything less was a kind of failure. But I also then learned that even best-selling authors and produced screenwriters often have day jobs because the creative industries are just so unpredictable. And that truth should help remove any sense of failure or shame you might have and make persistence more sustainable. Because the reality is that the decisions that gatekeepers make about what gets made depends as much about what's on their slates as it does your ability, meaning the roster of projects they're developing or planning to put out. It's down to timing and what publishers or broadcasters think the market wants as much as your ability. The industry isn't a straight line meritocracy, so you need to be patient. The lesson is you can't lose if you don't quit. If you stay in the game long enough and keep refining your craft, you have the best chance for timing working out and success coming your way.
Lesson 18.
When I wrote my first novel and later my first TV script, I did what almost every new writer does. I rushed to send it to agents, convinced it was just a numbers game. But a truth many beginner writers won't accept is that finishing something doesn't mean you're ready yet. Pro writers still redraft many times, and if you want to write professionally too, then yes, you do need an agent, but agents, editors, producers, and publishers only have time to spend on the first impression you make. They're drowning in submissions. So they rely on credible filters, competitions, industry gateway courses, referrals, and standout work they can instantly see a market for. I live by Kobe Bryant's advice that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but you have to play smart. And that means making yourself undeniable before you take that first shot. So try to get your work championed by someone inside the industry, or learn how to write something that instantly signals professional quality. This isn't going to happen with your first or second draft. Ultimately, screenwriters need representation because companies won't read your work without it. And novelists usually need something published or a manuscript that proves marketability before agents take serious notice. So don't chase agents first, become the writer that agents want to represent, and my videos will help you do that. And talking about representation takes us into the final lesson.
Lesson 19.
I used to think that agents sign writers if the writing alone is good enough. Agents are the gatekeepers of quality, so of course they love great writing, they need it, but you have to also remember that while writing is an art, publishing and entertainment are industries, and they survive by selling writers' abilities and work to make profit. Agents are the same, and while they're vital for quality control, their job dovetails with them having to be a marketer. So you need to think about the market you're serving so they see the merit in taking you on. And to do that, they need you to write material that demonstrates your range or market value, not just your personal passion. Agents sign writers they think they can sell and make a profit from representing. Position yourself as someone who can be sold. Either broaden your range of writing to give them options, or demonstrate total mastery of a niche so agents can see the business case in taking you on because you're the obvious option for writing that genre. And the less time you spend guessing what should come next, the faster you can finish writing novels and scripts that truly stand out. So to learn how to do that properly, you should start with my free story planning course here and the GPT in the description, then level up to the Pro Writer Blueprint course where you'll learn more than a decade of proven practical wisdom in a system that has helped brand new and experienced writers craft finished stories and achieve industry success in weeks and months instead of years.